guess what? What do medieval and Renaissance literature prosecuting homicides, ensuring environmental sustainability of electronics, and reducing third-party security risks have in common? That's who our next speaker is. So please welcome Edna Conway. Well, we've been following Edna's work for a long time. I learned a lot from her. I'm a student of Edna's work. Please take one.
Take a chair.
Take a chair. There are 5 of them. Pick one. Go in any corner. So, Edna, we are so glad to have you. And we wanted to do this for quite some time. In fact, we spoke at Robert's event probably 3 years back on cloud security, and that was interesting. So I thought we'll come down and chat with Edna a little bit of how she secures the global value chain. And this is quite interesting because, we talk about cybersecurity only in the form of data, but I think Edna's role that she has really started a new role that others are picking up. And let's start with that. Let's, Edna, just a little bit of background of yours, and we'll.
So, first of all, thanks for having me here, and it's always a joy to be in a room with a small group of people. I'm used to standing in large environments with lights shining in my eyes. So, please ask questions if you have any. Because what he didn't tell you is, in addition to being a very eclectic person, if you really want to listen to me talk nonstop without breathing, because my maiden name is Pizzoni, sono Edna Maria Cristina Pizzoni, I will just continue like this unless somebody interrupts me. So, and Larry Clinton will tell you that is absolutely.
I thought I was doing all the interruption, 5, 8 questions.
So, I think there's something fundamental with it we need to understand, and part of it is my title. So I'm the Chief Security Officer for Cisco's global value chain, and lots of you might say, that's fantastic, what the hell is a value chain, Edna? Because note, it is not the word supply chain on purpose. So the value chain is the end-to-end life cycle of anything that is part of anything we offer at Cisco or anything that any other enterprise offers. And so what I've discovered is lots of people use supply chain, and they use supply chain because they make nothing. So for example, the US government, which is actually delivering citizens services, but they make nothing. So they only have a supply chain. We have a value chain. And in addition, what I do is I look at the fundamentals of security. So note, it's the Chief Security Officer, not the Chief Information Security Officer. So I worry about physical security, logical operational security, security technology in the right place at the right time, as well as information security, and the best of all, behavioral security, because as Larry pointed out, the reality is, at the end of the day, there is a human involvement here. So I want you to sort of keep that in mind. And Larry gave me a great lead-in, so I am grateful, and I promise you we hadn't seen each other in quite some time. We did not connect on this. But 11 years ago this month, I had the opportunity to actually evangelize for both Cybersecurity Awareness Month as well as Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And so I'm a breast cancer survivor, and my solution to advertising, which I think we all need to do, is to make a t-shirt that I wore that said, yep, they're fake, the real ones tried to kill me, the attack was thwarted, I won. So this is a particularly special month for me. That's sort of a start.
That was a great opening, right? Start with the applause. So we spoke about quite a few topics. Probably we can cover some here, and then we're going to invite 2 other guests to join us to expand that conversation, and the learning group will go. So you were responsible, as you mentioned, about the entire value chain. And in terms of value chain, where do you see the two, especially the hardware and software, combining? Because that's some magic there that probably you have done, and you have seen that not many people, in terms of hardware security and software security.
So it's a great question. Let me think about it in a slightly different way, which is when I think about the solutions or the offers, I think about hardware, software, services, as well as cloud offers. And so if I asked all of you today, if you have a beverage in front of you, take a sip of it and think about, am I now connected to the internet? Am I experiencing the digital environment? No. How about if you take a nice deep breath? Take a nice deep breath. I said this to a group of people, and I didn't know in the audience, honest to God, was a group of yoga teachers. And I said, are you feeling connected now? And they all nodded and said, yes, we're connected and centered. I was like, oh, good God, that's not the kind of connected that I meant. So that one backfailed. But you're not connected or experiencing the digital environment. Why? Because we experience the digital environment, whether actually ingested, implanted, or other ways through a device. There's still a device. So the intrinsic connection between hardware, software, the services that support them and rally around them, as well as the cloud offer, which I remind everybody, people like, oh, Edna, we're doing an acquisition at Cisco. We don't have to worry about value chain security. It's a cloud offer, right? I mean, really? So what does that mean? God came down and just gave it to you? Last night at dinner, I told everybody, you know, my view is, if you excuse the pun on religion, only God made something from nothing. The rest of us, we have value chains, right? So you need to recognize that the cloud is offered through a data center. The data center has equipment in it. The equipment doesn't run without firmware. The firmware is simply a tangible manifestation of hardware. So if you want to wonder about what I'm thinking about, I think about things like derived polynomial expressions and the logic of chips as flags for anomaly detection. Why? Because as attacks get more sophisticated, and as we get to, and I wrote this down, again, thanks to Larry, focus on impacts, not attacks. What I do is focus on 3 threats and 4 impact areas, which we can talk about.
So let's talk about the 3 threats and 4 impact areas. Let's talk about from your vantage point, what do you see as global considerations? I mean, taking to the next level from the devices and the connectivity. I mean, there's a global supply chain and value chain, right? And I am, with your role, you are having a more global vantage point. What do you see that we need to be considering in terms of a geopolitical or a supply chain issue?
So, we had a panel up here about information sharing, and there was a very important theme, which is that, cybersecurity needs to be addressed in a way that is collaborative. I would take the cyber out of it, and I would say security needs to be addressed in a way that is collaborative. Look, we live in a time right now where we're seeing more geopolitical territorialism than we've ever seen in a long time, right? That's the reality. But that doesn't mean there aren't pockets and there aren't nation states who are focused on coming together. So a glaring example, that panel talked about the need for more information sharing. DHS actually got the obligation based on the 2018 Secure Technology Act that came down right at the end of Congress's session in 2018 to create a supply chain security task force for information communications technology. There are 4 work groups. I sit on the executive committee of that task force. One of the work groups is information sharing. So what I see is an effort for the first time to actually cross-pollinate. ISACs are great. Collective ISACs are even more important, but it's still only a certain set of communities. And that panel hit on the reality of there are competitive concerns when you share certain information. Let's be honest. There are also concerns about legal liabilities, right? I didn't go to law school for nothing, right? The truth of the matter is, as a private enterprise, if you share certain information, there might be ramifications. There might be a whole host of ramifications. So that information sharing group just put out its interim report that went up to the FASC, which is the new Federal Acquisition Security Council that was created as well by that Secure Technology Act, which is going to be leveraged by the Department of Commerce in implementing regulations for that new executive order that came out in May, and we're all waiting for October 12th is the due date for the Department of Commerce regulations. Long story short, one of the findings we found, and the primary finding we want to work on, is we need legal analysis as to what the government can share. I hold a TSSCIQ clearance. I don't want the government to share it with me. I want the government to share it more broadly. We have the privilege of living in a democracy. Many other people do around the world. That results in a different kind of set of boundaries to information sharing. We're going to tackle that in the information sharing work group head on. We're going to get legal analysis of what the government can give to us, and more importantly, what safe harbors need to be put in place from a regulatory and legislative perspective in order to protect private companies as they sit there. And that's the first time I've heard anybody sit down and say, let's tackle the legal liabilities. And maybe it helped because one of the executive committee members was an outspoken attorney. But the reality is we have to do that together. So that's one thing that I see from a nation state perspective. The downside I see is still isolationism from an industry perspective. So healthcare still thinks that their IoT is different than other IoT. And look, I understand that an industrial control system is different perhaps than a pacemaker, but at the end of the day, they're connected devices that have functionality. So we need to start thinking more about what we have in common to identify a set of global, note global, regulations and standards that can be followed that aren't, and I love my colleagues at NIST, they are some of the most talented people I've ever had the privilege of working with. But when you look at a NIST standard on IoT and it references, let's see, for those who know NIST, the NIST are 800, 171, 161, and 53, that's over 2013 controls. Who the hell's going to read 2013 controls besides a crazy insomniac like me? So what I did was I actually went and I did a mapping to what I was deploying across our value chain. And I said, can I say that I am in the spirit of what they're doing? But that mapping is a challenge.
Right.
There's something else that I want to add, Val, as well, which was worthy of note to these colleagues.
Of course.
There is something that is called the Charter of Trust. It's 18 companies. It's not private-public. It's private-private. And it's 18 companies who came together and identified what we call 10 fundamental principles of trust. The second principle, which is near and dear to my heart, is securing the digital supply chain. And what we're trying to do is talk to one another about how we might go about doing that. But what we're doing is mapping existing international standards so that all of a sudden people have a roadmap to say, if you are aware of and implementing X, Y, Z, and it's 10 or 6, not 2013, what you can do is achieve collectively a higher degree of fidelity. If we do it together, guess what? We're all in one another's value chains. We're all customers of and suppliers to one another.
Right.
That's a way to win.
Right. I was really thrilled by the announcement and all the work that started off in the Charter of Trust. Was it Siemens, I think, one of the?
Siemens kicked it off.
Right. So Siemens was gung-ho about it, and I was in Canada when we did this last, I think 3 months back, we opened the Cybersecurity Catalyst in Canada, and Siemens was the main sponsor. They talked about Charter of Trust. But I think it has probably not seen as much prominence as we would like to. I mean, I think Charter of Trust is amazing, just like the Safe Code initiative, right? Those are the pillars on which or the platforms on which we can build into the digital ecosystem. And I think, Safe Code, Charter of Trust, it's not just public-private that we keep talking about. The private-private is as important. So that brings me to another question. Edna, you have spoken a lot about the hyper-connected world. You did a TED Talk. And we spoke about the industry sharing and the public-private sharing. How about the people just sharing everything, right? I mean, are we going to a direction that we cannot scale back from, or will not be? I mean, this is more of a, I would say, philosophical question as much as it is a digital question, right? I mean, in your role.
It's a great question, and I have a very different answer to it, which is the solution is moms and dads. And then the next line is educators. We teach our children to walk across the street, but look both ways first. They are born, for quite some time now, digitally native. We teach them nothing about being digital natives. So the burden is on us. And the story, if you want to get a hoot, I will tell you the story of how the TED Talk came to be. They asked me to do it for years, and I said, look, I've been in corporate America for so long that I unfortunately have been indoctrinated into corporate speak. I cannot speak to the general public any longer because I use things like third-party ecosystem, robust modalities, and everybody sits there and said, but I just wanted to buy a refrigerator, right? So the story is a funny one. I wrote this out and I said, fine, you want me to do it, I'll do it for God's sake, but I'm not gonna come to any of your TED Talk presentations, I'm not gonna read your book, I'm just gonna show up. So I wrote it out, and a woman who has been taking care of my house for years was in the office, and I had 2 executive communications people on my WebEx, on my telepresence video so my office in New Hampshire was like command central. I could literally command the world from my office. And when the apocalypse comes, come see me because I have a water filtration system, munitions. I really have MREs in the basement. I'm ready. I'm a really big risk fan and preparation fan. So I said, you know what? You guys are worried about this. You think it's too corporate. Let me just read it. So I read it. I started out. It's a TED Talk. It has to be 15 to 18 minutes long. I am not, honest to God, more than a minute and a half into it. And I noticed she's got the Windex and she's cleaning. I looked at her, I said, Jessica, what are you doing? I asked you to listen to this because I wanted your opinion. She said, yeah, it's really boring. I was like, okay. Good feedback. The 2 ex-coms are trying not to laugh out loud in front of their boss, but they're on video, so they didn't do a good job of hiding it. So I rewrote it, and here's what I talked about. And if you really want to have a hoot, watch it, because it is the consumer answer. I take a big amount of time thinking about young ones, and I had a young neighbor, and I talked about what she did. She actually spent way too much time with me, and she tested her skills, and she hacked a connected freezer that one of my other neighbors had. And they had just come back from, I should mention again, I live in New Hampshire, so this will make sense in that context. They just came back from deer hunting season, so they had, and they had a good season. They had two packed freezers filled with venison. She shut off their freezers. So the entire neighborhood was like at my doorstep saying, we know you were involved in this somehow, and you need to fix it because this is the best year we've had in like 15 years of hunting. I also talk about a connected refrigerator, and here's what we need to do. Teach your children, and that story came from my baby sister. I am blessed to have one sibling. She's 12 years younger than me, and for any of you who are the older child, you will understand that inevitably when you get the call, no matter how old you are, even at this age, she said, I'm thinking about buying a new refrigerator. I immediately reached in the drawer and got out my checkbook because I knew what this was going to be. I was wrong. She was actually looking for advice. She said, I looked at this device and it has all these features. And she was all excited because we're all looking for efficiency, right? We're all too busy in today's day and age. How many of you feel that all of the connectivity that we have has enhanced your productivity? Are you feeling really more productive? Okay, hence why I live in the woods in New Hampshire. The reality of what she was considering was something challenging, and it was a challenging question that she posed, should I buy this because I think it's going to be really effective for me? And if you're like me, I'm that one woman in the supermarket, if you're ever there, who's always like, my hair's on fire, I'm rushing, the earbuds are in my ear, I'm the person talking at the checkout counter, and then what comes out is a word that's, not a nice word, I forgot the eggs. Inevitably, you would think eggs would be something I'd remember, but I don't remember them. And now there's 8 people behind me, and I'm like, could somebody go get me eggs, or can I go back? And they're all like, oh God, this woman's holding up the line. That would be useful to have a connected refrigerator that takes photos, that actually notices that your egg container is empty, and you could check that on your mobile while you're going through the egg aisle. Wouldn't that be enhanced productivity? So I looked at Beth and I said, hey Beth, this is my kid sister. Let me just ask you a question. 1, does the manufacturer have a patch and upgrade report that's out there? Does the warranty indicate how often they're going to patch? Do you know where the data is actually getting stored? I believe you use some medication that you would not like other people to know about, and it's refrigerated. They're capturing photos. Do you want your refrigerator to be hacked? Because last time I told you to patch something on the home network, I don't think you did it, did you? Because you're not using a Cisco router, you're using somebody else's router. And I had to get that in, guys. But the reality is, she said, let me weigh the risks. We need, to go back to something Larry said, to teach our digital natives to weigh risk. We weigh risk every single day. And we need more of the young ones and those of us who are more seasoned to talk about that. And I have no idea how much time I have left.
You got 2 more guests joining us, so.
Okay, so I have one thing that I want to say. He's going to have to throw me out.
No,
How
you're
many
gonna be with us for this one.
How many folks here are from industry, on the industry side? Okay. So last night, I very rarely do I have the privilege of coming in advance. I usually skid in, hair on fire to the event. Val was kind enough to invite me to dinner. And so we're going to hear from, and I will not be able, I think, to join this session, but we're going to hear from Jeremy Currier later today. Jeremy, wave. Okay.
Yes.
I won't take away Jeremy's story, but I'm just going to tell you he's 16 years old. I'm going to challenge everybody in industry here today. This is what we can do. Ready? Help one person. I met Jeremy. I fell in love last night. Fortunately for him, I've been married to the guy I went to the prom with for 45 years. Because I might be a little too old. But I've already called the head of my corporate social responsibility, my SVP, who I've known for years, who I love. She's a pure, wonderful woman, and said, I want to find a Cisco networking academy in Detroit area if I possibly can, and I have somebody I want to put in it, and can we give them a scholarship? I don't know if I'm going to pull it off, but I want every single one of you from industry in this room to help Jeremy before we leave, or next week. If we do one thing together, and then we do one thing together, we're going to move this mission. I promise you.